What's up, YouTube? Here with an update on Alcadeus control. It's been 24 hours since I originally built the deck for shits and giggles for a video for you guys. But today, when I got up and sitting here working on various things by my computer, having the deck sitting right next to me and it was still built, I started playtesting it a little bit. And 6 hours worth of playtesting later, the more and more I realized the deck was actually playing a hell of a lot more consistent than I ever expected it to. And as such, if I put more thought into it, with a little more of an objective mindset as to what it needed to do to be competitive, what could it be? So I cut it back to the bare minimums, which was essentially like Shocknaws, Lyras, Alcadeus, Spark Cages, and Sabertooths, and was like, okay, now what do I do from here? And rebuilt the deck back from the ground up. There was a couple people that had seen the video that I posted last night that really liked the idea behind the deck and how fun it seemed to play. And then I spent about an hour talking to Aiden Thorne about some various ideas and plays that the deck could make and ratios to use between certain cards, and finally came up with this build here, which at the moment I believe to be probably at about the 98th percentile of what it should be doing and how it should be doing it. You might have never thought to see Alcadeus as being a competitive card, but right now what I've done is taken sort of your shining Saber Bolt, well, that's not Bolt because there's no fire in it, but sort of your standard Saber build as a core that would be your almost kind of anti-meta deck, especially when you're playing Darkness with it, as you're out the dragons and things like that in the meta. And I gave it an entire new engine that gives it something nothing else has. So it keeps up by doing the things that you would expect a Saber build to do, but then throws a loop, especially when your opponent sees you drop Alcadeus and they're just like, what the hell are you playing that piece of trash for? And then you proceed to stomp their face with it. And then they become a little more humble about it. So it gives an old dog all sorts of new tricks that allow it to even harder wreck other rogue matchups like mono red Dracons. Decks like my other previous Andromeda control build that play like 8 birds, and my whole point is to spam birds and drop big dragons. This deck punishes them like none other. It can shut down opposing Saber builds. Blurple even has trouble with it. There's an alternate version to the deck that I'll talk about at the very end for a moment that'll shut down Blurple and those type of decks even harder. But the way it's built right now, I feel, is really honestly the most consistent way to play it, to have a solid matchup in the current meta. So anyways, we start off with 2 copies of Star Lantern. This is cut back from 3 from the previous build. The progression that the deck runs, you're pretty much setting up for a turn 4 Sabertooth, and as such you're wanting Shocknaw to be your turn 3 play. So you really didn't need Star Lantern as much. And I noticed that I would have a ton of Star Lanterns in hand every now and then. I'd have 2 copies in hand when I didn't need them both or whatnot, and I was always just sort of manning one because I didn't want it. So it sort of made its way down to 2. We are playing 3 copies of Shocknaw. I had tested this at 2 for a little while. I didn't like a 2-2 lineup between Shocknaw and Alcadeus, but then I thought, well, if one Alcadeus gets mana'd, then it's like a 2-1 lineup for this main combo of the deck, which still seemed nice. But I ended up adding Essence Elf into the deck, which opens up so many doors in the types of plays that the deck is able to make. It really took it to a whole new level, and as such, putting Shocknaws at 3000s to be able to dodge Barrage and take care of opposing birds and Dracons and Razorhides and Seneschals and whatnot, it just got absolutely stupid. So Shocknaw most certainly made its way back up to 3 copies. We have 3 copies of Lyra because she's the most broken tap control card like ever printed, obviously. 2 copies of Alcadeus. 3 is way too many, and 1 you're just not going to see it as consistently enough. But once you get Shocknaw and Alcadeus on board, you can start making all sorts of fun plays. He's really not even needed, but it's when he's there, he just sort of has this shock factor when he hits the board. A lot of times your opponent just sort of is like, what the hell are you playing that for? Because this is one of those cards that just sort of has that aura of not being a good card. And every time I've looked down at these 2 in my collection, I wanted to make a deck around it. And now that I've done it and play tested it and seeing how good it can actually be, just sort of breaking that mold, and it's not something that anybody that doesn't see these videos will ever expect. You can kind of use that to your advantage too. You know, if they sort of see the standard build that's working, but then you're dropping Alcadeus, they'll think maybe you're not as smart of a player, especially if you get here quick in game one, and you can use that to your advantage if they think that you're just not this top-end player, where in fact you're actually doing something different because it allows a new play style that the deck's not used to seeing, or that the game is not used to seeing, and you're just abusing it to your advantage like none other. We played the 3 copies of Spark Cage for your tap draw, and then I went ahead and added 2 copies of Stormspark Blast to the deck. If it gets down to a shield war, and getting one of these in shields can really change the tide of the game, as well as once you have a setup with like Shocknull, or really any set of maybe 2 or 3 creatures on board, and you go offensive with Stormspark, it can make a huge difference, especially if you have Essence Elf on board and your opponent does also. Going offensive with Stormspark and then killing off their Essence Elf first to weaken everything else they control can change the tide of the game insanely fast. So anyways, there we have 15 light. We're playing 17 nature, which includes the entire nature lineup that I mentioned that I wish I had in the original build of this from last night, which is 3 Perkleback, 1 Moonhowler Tribe, 2 Razor Hides, all 3 Sabertooths, the 1 Flamespike, and then the new addition is the 2 copies of Essence Elf. Like I said, putting Shocknull at 3,000 to get over Razor Hides and Seneschals is absolutely nuts. You get over all of your opposing Firebirds like none other anyways. Your Sabertooths can win out over opposing Sabertooths, and you get to maintain your advantage. This is a very battle-orientated deck. You don't go crashing into your opponent's shields like mad. You want them to bait out things on the field, and then you tap through and run it over, and just dwindle out their resources that way before starting to make pushes for the shields, at which point it shouldn't really matter because you'll have a really solid setup by then anyways. So in this battle-orientated deck, the boost that Essence Elf gives really gives you an edge in combat that makes a huge difference. We play the 3 copies of Reap and Sow, of course, for draw and ramp, and 2 copies of Root Trap to take care of whatever, especially big dragons around Lux. As for Darkness, we are down to playing 8 Darkness, which is 3 Bone Blades, 3 Terror Pit, and 2 Skull Shatter. In the previous build, we were playing Gloom Hollows and Screechings and Hydra Medusas, and in testing, Hydra Medusa was absolutely amazing, but the issue I found as far as consistency went was Hydra plus Sabertooth, and just the way that those Evos were working was just sort of conflicting with the overall consistency of the deck. And when you're playing sort of an odd strategy, such as Alcadeus and Shocknull is, you want the deck to be as consistent as possible, which is why we are at exactly 40, not even 41, because you don't want to risk the difference that could make. Now here for the end of the video, there's a talk about that the deck could do, or was doing, as far as the deck was being built into the profile that it is now. The last card of the deck that was cut was the 3rd copy of Skull Shatter. This was cut for the 2nd copy of Stormspark. It really came down to either playing the 2nd Stormspark or the Grand Gear over Skull Shatter. In tap control, having a 9,000 Skirmisher is absolutely amazing, as well as just being able to have that defense off for like opposing Sabertooths and whatnot. But as far as having Shield Blast and such went, the 2nd copy of Stormspark felt like the better call than playing Grand Gear, so that's why Grand Gear didn't make the deck. If you're comfortable playing a deck, at 43 to 46 cards, there's all sorts of stuff you could put in here. But as far as needing to keep a deck like this as consistent as possible, that more so than ever I felt was not even the slightest possibility to break 40. Not even for 41 for the Grand Gear, so that is what it is. Similarly is the 3rd copy of Star Lantern. We went from 3 Star Lantern, 3 Gloom Hollow, which was a lot of awesome defense, just down to 2 Star Lantern. The 3rd could go back in. But on turn 3, you're either wanting to play Razorhide or Shockgnaw 9 times out of 10, and that's why the third copy of Star Lantern ended up being cut. Aiden brought up a really awesome point that the deck could do, which was play a playset of Starlight Strategist. Being a Skyforce champion as well as Alcadeus is, when this guy enters the field, he taps something, and then every time another Skyforce champion enters the field, it re-triggers him to tap something else. There's all sorts of awesome tap things that you can do with this, but there was a couple problems with that. Is one, between playing Stormspark, Spark Cages, and Shockgnaws, there's all sorts of tap going on already, so it seemed like this was almost giving you too much tap. Your opponent's not going to have that many creatures on board that you're going to need to be tapping that many things over and over and over and over and over again. Similarly, as a 6-drop, it conflicts with that mid-game plays of Lyra, who is just hands down better than dropping a single copy of Starlight Strategist would be on turn 6 or for 6 mana in general whatsoever. So I didn't feel like this was the right play to make, even though it could seem like it has some really awesome plays to do. Just overall, it's not going to be the most consistent or best thing to do. Now, right before making this profile, one last card came to mind that I haven't tested all day, but I probably will, which is one copy of Dark Return. Taking a copy of this to bring back any sort of piece whatsoever for whatever plays you need could very certainly be an extremely strong card in the deck, and I most certainly will be testing to get this card into the deck. Now, before cutting the third Skull Shatter for the second Stormspark Blast, the deck did have a 9-card Darkness engine, and I was working with an alternate playstyle for the deck, which was Fire instead of Darkness, which started off with 2 copies of Helaflame. This could be 3, it could be 1. I've always hated playing more than 1 personally, because I feel like I never want more than 1. But if I get it and have to end up manning it, and then I didn't have one available, I didn't like that, so I ended up choosing that for that particular version I would have played 2 copies of Helaflame. 1 copy of Bolt Tail, especially because of playing Essence Elf. This would be a Billion Degree, I just don't have one yet. It should be here in the next couple of days in the mail anyways. But just that fast attacker, and then sort of to play along with the tap control that the deck does. Billion Degree being able to attack untapped allows you to do things without having to use your tap control stuff for it, which is a really nice boost for the deck. 2 copies of Infernus. Infernus against things like Blorple or Mono Dracon Rush, or things like my Andromeda control, where I'm trying to build up all these birds before dropping dragons. In a deck like this, if you were to be able to control all of their birds by tapping them out and killing them, and then ramping into Infernus by like turn 7, the game's going to be over before your opponent could ever play something like Andromeda anyways. But the reason I ended up choosing to go with Darkness over Fire in the long run anyways, is dropping Skull Shatter 1 turn faster than you would have been able to drop Infernus really shuts down decks that ran Andromeda and things like that just as much anyways, and puts them in a top decking mode. And if you've already wiped out their entire field with the tap attack methods that this deck uses, you're really doing the same thing as if you just left them with their hand and then played Infernus instead. You put them in a position where they have to top deck, which means they either put something in mana or they try and make a play, and it just playing the Skull Shatter and then controlling what they had on field between attacking and cards like Terror Pit seemed much better than leaving them with a hand and just rushing into Infernus. But the ability's there, and Infernus is just an awesome card. If it fits your playstyle, you can easily play this version instead. Don't get me wrong, just in my opinion, playing Darkness and the Skull Shatter was the better option. And then the final 2 cards for the alternate lineup would have been 2 Comet Missile and 2 Barrage. Normally, I would advocate 3 Barrage, but in this deck, Barrage kills all the targets that your tap control with Shockgnaw would have been killing anyways. So you don't want to take away all of your tap control kill targets that way. So I decided to cut the Barrage for a second copy of Comet Missile that'll take care of things like Gloom Hollow and Star Lantern and Grand Gear and things like that. So this was an alternate engine that the deck could play instead of Darkness. Um, just food for thought, per se. But anyways, that's the deck as it is. Before now, you probably never would have thought, or your opponents, if you just decide to build this, that may have not seen my channel or this video, would never expect Alcadeus to be a worthwhile card at all, much less a very key combo piece and an amazing tap control Saber build. So, you know, when you're playing a deck that's sort of anti-meta, I think we can call Saber anti-meta right now. Pretty much anything that's playing the Saber lineup is doing something to counteract this massive dragon meta by mana ramping and trying to pull off plays faster. When you sort of tie that in with the tap control stuff of cards like Lyra, and then go further with things like Shocknaw and Alcadeus and whatnot, this could almost really be like your first version of Stun. Blurple was like Control. I would almost say this is like your first Stun deck ever. It gives you a lot of the key components between, you know, your Terror Pits and Darkness stuff and your Saber for Rush and having fast double breakers in the forms of Sabertooth and whatnot, that you would expect to have out of any sort of faster paced Saber build in the game right now. But with the additional sort of tap control method that the deck is able to do with Shocknaws and Alcadeus and whatnot, gives you an edge over other Rogue and Stun type matchups and other Saber matchups and whatnot, that could really turn this into the type of deck that can play both sides very well, rather than being either the strictly like Andromeda meta or the anti-dragon meta. This one, while not playing dragons aside from Lyra, can sort of fit right in between that gap and play against either one just as effectively, which is something that I don't think pretty much any other deck in the game is capable of doing as easy as this deck can. So anyways, that's the deck. Let me know what you guys think. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. If you're wondering about the random music playing in the background, my old band from like 5 or 6 years ago, a couple of us are thinking about getting back together, and have pulled up some of our old material and things we were working on right before we stopped playing years ago. This is a song that never got titled. The title of it in iTunes for the MIDI file we have written of it right now is just called Blah. Sort of very Dream Theater, progressive-like. It'll be really fun. Hopefully come this summer if we're able to get things back up and going. If it all goes the way as planned, we plan on doing a full-out real recording of this song, which would be absolutely amazing. So know this, the music in the background isn't totally random. It's my music. It's awesome. So anyways, I'll stop tooting my horn here and talk to you guys later. Peace out.